the live stream. No, the main reason that I bring up my dad at all is I actually do want to talk about Canadian immigration to the United States. And also the tariffs that are currently affecting the relationship between the U.S. and Canada specifically.
Do you want to open with that?
Yeah,
I want to talk about this. I'm interested in it right now. I want to talk to you. I want to hear your thoughts.
Okay, well, I think to just like set the backdrop, because I think a lot of people know that there are tariffs that have been put in place or had been threatened for a while.
I think it's worth
getting
saying
into his presidency, right?
By the time this airs, they could be gone.
Yeah, it seems
which is tomorrow. By the way.
Day-to-day news. So we're filming this. We're filming this on March 5th, a Wednesday, and it should be coming out on the Thursday right after this. So and already in the past 3 days, there's been like daily updates and changes. So leading up to this point, there was the threats of tariffs like incoming. Trump gets into office, passes a 20 or through executive order imposes 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately paused these tariffs in exchange for
the fentanyl czar.
The fentanyl czar in Canada, and basically more control and effort of like the borders from like the Canadian and the Mexican side. That's what he's asking for, at least.
Yeah. Yes.
And then he paused for 30 days. And I think something that I didn't quite understand is like when this happened, I thought like he, at least from the Trump administration's perspective, had like met goals that they had in place. And then during that 30-day time period, he said, they wanted to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured. That's what Trump said.
Can I just say, it's very cute that you have notes, because whenever I do this stuff live and I don't know what I'm talking about, I just make it up. But you're like referencing.
Well, so actually for the audience, there's nothing in that notebook. It's just blank.
I memorized the quotes. Interesting.
And that's when Donald Trump said, Aiden's great.
And and he doesn't flake that much. Interesting that he said that. So there was a goal apparently during this time period that out of the initial concessions that he thought he got from Canada and Mexico, or that they did get from Canada and Mexico, which I'll talk about in one sec, that a further deal needed to be made, which I didn't quite understand, in the sense that I don't know what like that ideal trade agreement looks like for him, especially because in the previous administration, Trump had renegotiated aspects of NAFTA, like a large portion of NAFTA as it formerly was, I guess, was from his decisions in the previous term, as far as I understand. Anyway, this Canada puts in place this like quote fentanyl czar in which I had seen people saying that this was part of a plan that Canada already had in place, or like people were saying that Canada was only taking actions that it was intent on doing already, which might be the case. My understanding is that this pushed it forward a bit, and they did pick a fentanyl czar.
Yeah, I mean, so timeline everyone's not doing. He's like, he asked for tariffs, right? And then there's 30 days. It starts out, and then immediately before it happens, Canada says we're going to have more guards on the border and a fentanyl czar. Yeah. And then Mexico said the same thing.
And then similar from Mexico, I think Mexico actually did more. Something that I didn't know is like part of this, Mexico sent 29 drug lords into U.S. custody from Mexican custody in an effort to extradited people in an effort to like appease the tariffs being frozen. So
that's what, his messaging has been all over the place, which is initially it's this is for fentanyl, and now it's for economic disparity. And then I saw a quote yesterday, which is that nobody really knows what he wants, so there isn't anything they can do to like it's not clear.
That's my big issue.
That's been the latest. That is the latest like update to this story, right?
Brendan's only issue with Trump.
His only issue. You've been really pro Trump. You've been really pro Trump.
Is coming on,
especially in private. Especially in private. When you're away, when you're away from your platform
later. Okay.
But I think that is the frustration from what I can see, right? Because this 30-day freeze runs out, and then the tariffs are just back in place, and Canada and Mexico are like, we did what you wanted. Why are they back? Yeah. And then the tariffs, apparently there's an exception. There's a 10% instead of 25% tariff on energy, specifically Canadian energy exports. Yeah. And they
exempt the cars too, right?
And then today, that was the update today, is that the auto exports, or the auto industry, gets like a carve out now. And so
Yeah, I
that's the
heard
thing.
this-
It changes every morning. The Canadians and the Mexicans seem very frustrated that the goalposts continue to be shifted, much like me in an argument. And I'm kind of, that's the kind of the introduction to this topic is that's what's going on with the tariffs. I think it seems crazy inconsistent. I don't fully understand what the goals are.
Here's the deal. Zoom out. Tariffs are problematic, right? This is like a weird thing. It's not consistent. But like for Canadians, it seems like the bigger issue is that all of these tariffs seem to be in service of turning the country into the 51st state. He keeps talking about that and like in a less and less joking way.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested because I don't talk to a lot of Canadians because they're gross and they disgust me, but I would love to hear, like, do you have a Canadian POV on like what that means?
Wait, remind me, and I guess everybody watching. Yeah. You born in Canada, came here.
Yeah. So a brief backstory on me. I am a Canadian immigrant to the US. I was born in Canada. I grew up in Canada when I was young. I like permanently, I moved around a bunch when I was really young to the UK, back to Canada, to the US, back to Canada, permanently moved to the US in 6th grade. And I lived on a border town in northern Washington. So I literally lived on the Canadian border.
Okay.
Like one of my cross country practices was they would take us to the border, drop us off at the border crossing, and then we had to run back to high school.
That's awesome.
And so that was a little experience of
ICE would never let you do that today.
they would never, dude. Okay, and this is
Just a Canadian child running from the border into America.
you know what's funny? It's so like when people talk about like border security and things like that right now, I always joke about what the Canadian border is actually like growing up because I'm not kidding. The border in Canada, like the border between Canada and the US, and like where I grew up, it's a ditch about the width of this table. Like I would be running to back to high school on this side, and then
We're
5 feet away.
Canada pay for it. We're digging the ditch, and we're gonna make Canada pay for it.
It's well known Canadians can't climb.
That's a well-known fact.
And then if you
They fall and stumble.
Poor balance.
and then you're literally a hop away from jumping into it's very easy.
Sure.
Like if you wanted to hop the border, I
Yeah,
guess.
with a bag full of fentanyl, which I do occasionally.
And then
money.
that's kind of the circumstance that I grew up in. And also there's a lot of like kind of basic economic ties in that area. Like a really common thing is like if you went to the Costco in our area on Sundays, like 80% of the cars in the Costco parking lot would be British Columbia license plates. Like it's like
They're just driving over the border for Costco, and then
people that live in Canada come
Costco's
down
our
to buy
greatest export
goods.
as a nation. I swear to God,
The
everyone
fentanyl
loves
there
it.
is super cheap.
Well, you buy
That would put the dealers out of business.
You
if
buy it in
Costco
bulk.
had
Yeah.
fentanyl.
Yeah.
that's
They pair it. You buy it, you get a free soda on the side.
No, oh my God. I
you
mean,
get your hot dog, your fentanyl, and then who knows? You go in for the fentanyl, you come out with a TV.
if you think the cartels can offer a remotely comparable experience to a Costco, the consumer will choose the Costco every time. It's just a better experience.
So pitching the cartels, being like, I'm telling you, man, if you kill a few less people, you put some TVs up front and you sell and you give them
Put a hot dog for cheap.
you give them cheese samples,
yeah.
they'll buy so much more fentanyl.
Yeah. You give them fentanyl samples, they'll buy so much more fentanyl.
the Costco fentanyl sample.
Whoa! Just people like passed out on the fucking concrete at Costco. It's like an aisle full of
Guy with
people.
19 disguises on his 30th through the fucking fentanyl samples line.
I think that, but yeah. So my family's Canadian. Pretty much all of my family lives in Canada, except for my parents and like my brothers. Basically.
Okay.
I decided to like call a few people.
Okay, that's what I was hoping. Yeah, I want to.
So just to get like a general vibe on what's going on, because I think you've talked about this quite a bit, and this is like I think a somewhat well understood topic, is like Canada's kind of also in a bit of an economic crisis in general right now.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Like the dollar,
People are struggling.
Like I remember growing up, there was a period of time, my dad got paid in Canadian dollars because he worked out of Canada, even though we lived in the US. So there was a time when the Canadian dollar was like worth more than the US dollar growing up.
That's
like
crazy.
for like a year, and then basically on par for a long time. But now it's like, I think
Way
it's like
less.
70 cents to the dollar.
I made a video game with a Canadian developer, and so we got paid. We got our pay on Steam, and he's like, "I need to pay you now because every day it sits here, you're losing money as the Canadian dollar devalues."
It is so bad.
It's like it was like losing big percentages of what we got paid.
And I think the real estate crisis there is pretty out of control. Like housing is in the biggest cities in Canada is even more relatively unaffordable than it is in like the biggest US cities. And there's all these like economic issues in Canada that, from loosely talking to my friends prior to this, that they're grappling with. Like they're worried about their prospects of a future. And especially if they like went to college and like have a specialized profession they're supposed to go into, working in Canada kind of sucks. Cause if you could get a job in the US, you could get paid way more.
Yeah. One of the things I didn't know about until recently is the fact that there's the trade agreement where basically if you're a professional in certain categories, but in most like good categories, and then you get a job offer from the US, you just get to come here. Like you don't have to like get a visa. If you get a US job offer, this is part of what was previously NAFTA. And so if you're a Canadian professional and you're like an accountant or a software engineer and you get a job from an American company, you just go to the border. You don't even have to pre-plan this. And you're like, I'm here. Here's the job offer. Here's all the stuff.
Dang.
You just get let in.
I didn't know this until really recently.
It's a huge brain drain, like because it's that easy. And it's just like, oh, if Google in the US is going to pay you 3 times as much relative, you can just go, which is wild. So like 10,000 people do that a year.
Canada is trying to deal with this too, apparently, because so I read this article that I pulled up, and this was focusing on Canadian to US immigration in 2022. And from the previous year, it had more than doubled the amount of Canadians leaving Canada to go to the US in that year. And it seems to be an interesting like split among like age groups and like why people are going. There's a quote from an immigration lawyer in that article where he talks about most of the inquiries he's getting now are from young people that are like looking to move for financial
desperate
reasons.
to get out.
I actually tried to call the lawyer today and like ask him about like what it's like right now. And they didn't get back to me, but I called my one other relative that lives in the US is my cousin, and she works in biotech, and she moved to San Diego with her also Canadian boyfriend a few years ago. And I was letting her kind of break it down for me. And she's like, at the end of the day, like it just came to like money and like my profession. And she says like all the people in her field and like who studied with her in Canada also want to move to the US because she gets 3x her pay down here.
Yeah.
And she pays like a comparable amount in taxes. So like financially it makes sense. And then even if she wants to go back to Canada, and I think a lot of people in her situation, it sounds like they would want to go back to Canada
like
one day, they can save money faster to buy a home in Canada when they go back. And so that's like her experience as someone who's already made the move, right?
Speaking of homes, can I show this?
Are you going to show my actual home and my address?
Yeah, I'm going to show your home and address and your dad and where he lives. And
you can draw on it.
This is
here at Lemonade Stand.
I remember this. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Here at Lemonade Stand, we have fancy telestrator technology
on it,
to really make it a worse experience for the audio listeners.
I just think if people don't
you're
know
gonna
about
look right
Canada,
here.
like
You're gonna look right here. That's actually Atriarch's real home.
Yeah, I commute from Toronto. I got a $2.5 million shack in Toronto.
Fun fact: Ari is not allowed to leave the house between 9 and 5.
That's for religious reasons. But anyway, Canada's real estate market, if you don't know, is like one of the worst in the world. Basically, every major city, the prices have gotten astronomical. They had no 2008, 2009 housing bubble. Like they had it, but they didn't pop it the way we had it here. So it just kept growing.
Weird.
And it's continued to grow. And at this point, like any Canadian you talk to talks about how they'll just never own a home. Like essentially at their wages.
They've like given up.
They've given up completely. Yeah.
So this is the interesting thing to me is like, I was reading this article and I was like, this makes sense. Like the thing that my parents tell me all the time is like, the reason we moved to the US or the reason we wanted to be in the US was it afforded me like job and like economic opportunity that we wouldn't have had in Canada.
She knew you'd make dick jokes on a podcast one
exactly.
day.
And I said, Mom, you're right. I never could have made it doing this work in Vancouver. But I think that shared story is very similar between all the people I talked to. It's like, it basically like they had some sort of specialized job, like especially like software engineers as an example that I can think of.
In the tech industry, when I was still in the tech industry, so many Canadian software engineers, like so many companies in Silicon Valley have a Canadian branch like really smart people. And then again, now with these new rules, well, they've been here for a while, but like those people can just come to the US now and just make way more.
Right.
Yeah. And it seems like the financial aspect of it is the key mover on that over kind of everything else. Cause I ended up talking to another close friend of mine that still lives in Alberta. He lives in Calgary and he's trying to get a job in like finance right now. And I was like, what is like for you who's in Canada trying to find a job in Canada, how do things feel to you right now? And he's like, well, things are pretty like doomer here in terms of like economic, like owning a home, like the job market's really bad. It's tough to find work if you're a young person, even like if you're a new college grad.
Right.
And these things are all like shared frustrations among my friends. But then, and a big question I wanted to answer is like, okay, this trend of like people leaving Canada for the US because of pay, like primarily because of pay, or maybe like the data that I looked into, there's a ton of retirees as well, like wealthier Canadians that want to move like
live somewhere
to
else.
Florida, or they want to move somewhere with like lower taxes where they can settle down and it's warmer. The question that I wanted to answer was, okay, so you can see this trend in immigration happening, but is it still happening in 2024 and now in 2025, which was not in this census data? Like it doesn't go up to that point yet. And I was really curious because like politically things are changing so significantly right now. And then on top of that, it's like not just the general politics of someone like Trump being elected in the first place, but the follow-up of the tariffs and the 51st state rhetoric.
It's even more of a squeeze. Yeah.
And my friend was talking about how even in Alberta, which is a place that's in Canada pretty conservative, and has more people than like BC would that are like Trump sympathetic or maybe fans of Trump from like the Canadian side. Yeah. He's never seen this level of anger among like all people there. My relatives, my friend is saying all of his relatives and his friends, everybody I talk to that lives in Canada is angry. They are like, this is fucked up that this is happening. Like, fuck the US. This is kind of what brings us together right now. And the idea of like, he said it's like the highest sense of like national pride he's seen in a long time, where it's like, fuck the States. It's like, we're Canadians. And that plays into people's idea or the appeal of moving into the US too. He was like, compared to like a year ago, I think a lot
poison us from the inside.
They used to want to poison us from the inside, but now they don't even want to get in. So maybe it's working. Maybe it's working in that regard. We're keeping the Canadians out.
The Albertans are like, how are we going to get over that ditch?
It's
big ditch.
I thought it was really interesting to hear him say, like, if you asked me or my friends a year ago and offered me a similar salary in the US for some type of job, I might have said yes, but now I would definitely say no. And the difference, but then the overarching like economic theme here is like, he was like, but I would still say yes if like the pay was like way triple,
higher. Right? People are still gonna.
And that was like what my cousin was wrestling with too, is that she's like, I don't like the political direction of the country. I don't know how long I want to stay here, but my career and my pay is so high here that I can't leave
money
yet.
Talks, right? Yeah.
So that's kind of what's going on is like, I think my parents are different. They're very proud to be American and they feel like more obligated to defend to the rest of my family, like why they live in the States and like why they like chose to live here basically. But the rest of my family is like dogging them for it.
For just being in America?
They're very angry about the 51st state rhetoric, all of the tariffs and like how they're going to suffer economically.
I've got a Canadian friend and I have been making 51st state jokes, obvious jokes, right? For a little while now. And then recently he's like, hey, I don't think it's funny anymore. Like, he told me just privately, he's like, I know you don't mean it, but like, I don't like it anymore. Cause it's seeming more and more serious politically. It seems like, Trump said it as a joke at first. And now he keeps saying like, he keeps calling it Governor Trudeau. He keeps saying like, and so they're like, they just don't want to have their sovereignty threatened so regularly by the neighbors of the South with all the nukes. Canada has no nukes, by the way. So I wanted to bring this up too. I got two things I want to bring up. One is that this is the craziest outcome that I ever could have expected. Recently, like a few days ago, a Canadian politician went to the UK and they're trying to get a deal where the UK's nuclear umbrella applies to Canada.
Oh my God.
So they're going to like Canada, to UK and France to make a world where theoretically the UK would be threatening the United States with nuclear war if the United States invaded Canada.
Wow.
Like how crazy are things getting? That's how wild, you know.
A major turnaround from
From like
a year ago. Like what? From like 2 months ago. Like that's
And I
Jesus.
just didn't expect Canada specifically to get involved in this. I didn't expect this to become a Canadian. What are you double gunsing us?
I'm picking a side.
Oh yeah.
Okay, a number to reiterate this, which I think is so interesting, is like I think you might have seen this like 2 decades ago, something like that. The amount of people coming in and out of Canada to the U.S. was like it was like a few thousand on either side, net in a given year. And there was even a year or two where there was more people going into Canada than out. And then the most recent tract was like 126,000, right? Or like.
That was in 2022.
2022, right? So like, just to give a sense, it is massive, the amount of people who are going from Canada to the US 2 years ago. And then you're right. It's like, is that going to increase? Is that going to get,
that's
like in 20, like this year, is that going to get even worse because of economic conditions? Like the amount of Canadians who are immigrating to America now is gigantic compared to any amount in the past for like a 2 to 3 year period. Right after COVID, it just like shot way up.
Well, no wonder things are getting worse here. There's so many damn Canadians.
If they would just stay in their own state.
I don't think you should make jokes like that anymore.
Yeah. The friend was Aiden.
Told you in confidence.
I told you in confidence.
That's what I'm super curious about is like how that trend is going to hold up in the next like year or two is like there's this convergence of like sovereignty and national pride and wanting to be like, I am Canadian, like fuck the US, converging with like the economic hardship basically.
So that's great. I want to bring that up. That brings us up politically. So, you flash backwards 1 year, everyone in Canada is so doomer. It's just like, it's over, right? People are depressed. Housing prices too high, jobs too low. They're mad at Trudeau.
They're mad at Trudeau because he did so
Governor Trudeau.
Good job.
And there's fuck Trudeau signs everywhere. And it's become a foregone conclusion that him and his party were going to lose. That's the idea.
Yeah.
And then this 51st state thing starts happening. And it's the most shocking poll. I mean, the conservative government is still leading, and I think we'll still win. But it's become like way closer.
This is what I was actually thinking about this, and I'm glad you brought this up because I hadn't looked this up, but I was so curious if polling had picked up for Trudeau's party because I feel like this is a crazy circumstance where he's like defending the sovereignty of the nation. And I think this was in a video you made about how he like boxed one of the people from the other party.
You told me about this.
And that was the first swing in like his Liberal Party picking up was him choosing to box someone from one of the other political parties. And he won the fight. And it was kind of like it was literally like a liberals aren't pussies campaign. Like it was, and his polling dramatically picked up, and then he found himself in a position of prime minister like a little while after. And I was like, this is when he's been making the tweets and these things that I've seen. It's like, I wonder if the polling is following.
I mean, he's
suit.
not running again, so he's getting someone else. I think he's getting Mark Carney, but
he's just pushing the Liberal Party to be we're against Trump, we're fighting back,
and that's
like
more
rallying
now.
people. Yeah, that makes sense.
It reminds me of George Bush was a divisive president with pretty low polling numbers by the end, but after 9/11 it was like 98%. It was like the country was united.
Yeah.
And right now it seems like everyone's,
or like Rudy Giuliani post 9/11.
Exactly. Yeah. So right now the polling is like really rallying behind it because it feels like from the Canadians, from my side, I still think of it as like it's a little mean-spirited, but it still feels like a joke. As an American, I can't imagine we have tanks rolling in Toronto.
Yeah.
But from the Canadian side, it sounds like they're like really pissed off, like really rallying behind this idea of like stop calling us a state, And I would love to get more of your thoughts. I'm not a Canadian.
If King George in the UK kept referring to us as the colonies, I would be pretty annoyed. Yeah.
Today.
Right. Like if he was dropping that like on Twitter every day, I would be pretty fucking pissed.
We won the war.
We won. Like, we won. Get over it, George. Jesus Christ.
No,
that's a good point.
I think about that.
I got mad just thinking about it. I'm riled up just thinking about it.
I try to dig into my inner Canadian, and I'm like, I think like it annoys me. It's like it feels stupid. It feels like intentionally antagonistic because even though I think there's no realistic path for that becoming the case, also from my perspective as a Canadian, even in the world where it somehow happened, maybe this is a dumb thing to worry about, psychotic that it would all be one state to me. It's like,
It's pissed about logistics, dude.
Yeah.
It's the second biggest country in the world. And he's like,
maybe.
yeah, we'll just have that
That's one state.
Maybe if we respect it, it's like, all right, we're adding on nine provinces as states, 3 territories. You know, we respect the.
And then Trump looks south and he's like, we're thinking of all South America, a 52nd state.
That's what I'm saying. It would be insane if it was one state.
in Congress.
It'd be insane if it was one state.
40 million new people.
So, not the top priority issue with this, but that was honestly my first thought when I heard about it. I was like, it just wouldn't be one state. It doesn't make any sense.
Funny to be pissed about logistics.
Trump is probably like most Americans though, and does not realize you guys have states.
Yeah.
And that
No.
it is not just a big.
Well, we don't have
city.
states. We have provinces.
Oh, shit.
that's
They're
true.
provinces and
Smackdown.
territories.
I think Trump arguably like Nobel Peace Prize level stuff here in terms of uniting Canada as a people,
Yeah.
uniting Europe as a people, because they're all terrified now. He's uniting the world.
I mean, I've never seen
Not in the ways-
bad time historically where Europe wants to spend a whole fuck ton of money on military.
Right.
I think that historically is always a good thing, and I'm
And it
glad
always
that we're.
leads to peace. And I think Trump's really cooking
I know
something here.
that Germany just they have this thing called a debt break where they can't spend more than their budget. They're breaking it. They're like finally after it's been a long debate. They're finally like easing the debt break to spend 500, 800 billion euros. Sorry, billion, not million on military. They're gonna start doing this militarization of Europe. And I think that's base. That's awesome. It's going to be great. The more the merrier.
That's
No one.
what's the
This
track
has never
record?
gone wrong
It's never
before.
gone wrong, dude. I think when Germany militarizes, the world smiles. That's the old saying, right?
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that saying.
I'm not a big student of history. I just sort of go off the vibes.
I guess maybe the last thing that I was thinking about with the Canada thing is the 51st state. Like, I can see why it like frustrates people so much, and I've seen something similar with a few Danish friends about the Greenland stuff. They're like,
Interesting.
It's gone from like, I think when the initial reaction that I got from talking to friends when these things first hit the news was like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? It's like, this is obviously so dumb. This is like borderline a joke, but then he keeps talking about it.
Yeah.
And he keeps talking about it. And now people are angry. Like, and I find that, and it makes sense. Like from their perspective, I mean, as an American, I'm also not happy with it. Like, I don't think.
Yeah,
this
that
is
one's
good,
an interesting one, though. It's such a even more complicated because I feel like the people of Greenland keep saying they don't want to be Danish or American. They kind of want their own thing eventually. Right now, they're still Danish.
Yeah, I think that
You
part
know.
is more divisive, though, from my understanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That one's tough. I don't know.
I think there are a lot of people that are like pushing for Greenland independence. From the bit I've read and like asked about, it sounds like that is just more because there's aspects of Danish like society or like social systems that are like so integrated and like the Greenland is so reliant on. So people are not like there's a big chunk of the population that's not ready to relinquish those things, basically.
Yeah. It's a tough one for me because I saw a good video on it. And they talked about how, because some of the ice caps are melting, the real estate up there is becoming more incredibly valuable. Not in terms of like,
it's going to open like shipping.
it opens
routes.
shipping lanes and there's a ton of rare earth metals. So I feel like is some sort of global gold rush, and I don't fully understand. And I don't know where I stand. I really haven't made up my mind on where I stand on it, but I do think it's complicated given that there's like 3 distinct parties that all kind of want ownership.
I think my general opinion on these things is that like in this era of like kind of global free trade, like national sovereignty and things like that, is like there's probably some other analysis to do here in terms of like the costs of that system and like deconstructing like the global economics and stuff like that. But in general, I think that, this has led to like unprecedented relative peace and things like that. And we're starting to like pull back the like walls of like these institutions and rules around like invading and co-opting other countries. I think that's bad because it's like, I think that's bad. And because it's such a regression of like what global society is like built around, which I think is in a lot of ways good. And I'm not saying that there's no scrutiny to be had of that sentence either, but it makes me fearful. Is like, okay, well, if nobody's following the rules anymore, and we're going back to old times of invading and taking
might
over,
makes
and
right
like
for every situation.
sacrificing this like economic system that we've made. I don't know. The costs of that worry me.
There's a good book by Peter Zahan. I don't know how you say his name. You might, but called The Accidental Superpower. And it's basically about how the global order got set up, amongst other things, after World War II. And basically the US did this. The US could have continued the previous world order after World War II and instead was like, let's do this global thing. We, America, will basically make it happen, and we will pay for all the global shipping to be safe, and we will basically institute this order across the world. Asterisk, asterisk, right?
Yeah,
and
which
then
is
there's Soviet Union.
That the U.S. is like I feel like from a short-term perspective may even have come across as like generous, but it's like but in the long term, like ultimately it was way better for the
billions
U.S.
of people
too.
have come out of poverty. The issue, and at least what he talks about in the book, and I think that there's value to this, is as the world has gotten bigger and more complex, it is more expensive to do that. So the one area where there is, I don't want to say I agree with him, but there's truth to what Trump is saying is like, it is not feasible for America to police the world order anymore. And that is particularly true with like Russia doing what it's doing and China doing what it's doing. And so I don't think the extreme of, okay, let's pull back from everywhere and just be internal is good, because then the whole thing collapses. But there is, I think, truth to the idea that that order can't go forever. The US is $34 trillion in debt. We cannot afford to police everything in the world. Europe doesn't spend much on military. We do it for them. Same with, particularly Germany and Japan, right? Like at some point, it's not feasible for the US to go in this direction forever. And so I think this is inevitable to a degree. It's been 80 years exactly, basically 80 years exactly of the current world order. And Trump is very explicitly trying to tear it down. But I'm not convinced that like, if he wasn't there, then this wouldn't be in motion. You know what I mean?
I agree with that. 100% agree with that.
He's accelerating the motion a lot, but that is the motion. Like we can't afford this, just straight up. It can't continue in its current form. Something has to change.
That's funny, because let me hear my thoughts. I think that's super interesting, and I like your POV. But you guys talked about it like this was generous or whatever, and in my mind, it was like, and I'm like a patriot, dude. I'm actually
I wouldn't
this
actually
stuff has
call
been
it
set up
generous
to our benefit.
I agree with that.
It's self-serving.
It's self-serving, and I don't think that unwinding it is to our benefit. I think you're right that as these economies, China is now a bigger trade partner with most of the globe than America is. Like the fact that they're not stepping up to this it doesn't make much. Brazil is a much bigger economy than all these countries are bigger economies, and they want a bigger say in the world. I think it's going to shift because of that. But I think America trying to unwind it is kind of crazy because it's all helped us. It's all been to our benefit for so long. Like the system, NATO, the United Nations. Like we say that Europe is spending too much on, or not enough on military because we're spending too much. But it's given us so much power over European decisions. Specifically, like if we're like, hey, we want to build our EV industry outside of China, let's tariff Chinese EVs. Europe just goes along with it. They just do the same thing.
Yeah,
they do that because we have.
And once the U.S. unwinds, if it continues to happen, I don't think you get it back. Like, there's a particular situation in the world where the U.S. was in this position where all the previous global powers were decimated after World War II, except the Soviet Union. Yeah. They had all the industry, they had all the trade. They were the sole sort of standing, I guess, were the sole standing power. And we're in the position to dictate whatever we want. And there was this argument of like, they could have been like, we are going to be the new British Empire. We're going to fuck all y'all. I mean, totally. and instead they were very kind, generous people who we are all thankful for. And that's what we're taking away from it. Yeah, but and they were, according, I'm just going to put quotes here. They were very generous.
Absolutely no meddling.
Yeah.
Zero meddling.
Right.
Famously zero.
Show me the documents where we meddled one time. No, I think that's I think that is the pro. Like, I kind of agree with Brandon is like the deconstruction of, this is why it's a hard topic to.
It is hard, by the way.
This is a hard, okay, I think I'll say it in a more straightforward way. This is a hard topic for me to argue about, not at like a personal level, but I feel like there's a conflict as someone who I think I lean like pretty left on like most issues in general. And I think there's like I don't know if I definitely wouldn't call myself a socialist like outright, but I think there's a socialist viewpoint here where that is also advocating for a like deconstruction of this global order, to not for American fiscal reasons, but to like dismantle the like systems of oppression that like they would identify exist across the world among this current system. Not that oppression and like people being exploited didn't exist before World War II.
It didn't.
But it's and that level of like American like empire and like control is I don't know. It's super interesting because it's like, yes, that has such a demonstrable positive effect if you believe in, I don't know, like getting rid of all these things has like such a identifiable harm on the US, but there's different perspectives on like why that all needs to be deconstructed and come down. And I think because there's all these different layers of like what people see as the most important outcomes, who are the people that need help the most, what actions would help those people. The solution is, I feel like I'm a very like solution orientated person, and this problem is so layered. It's like, oh, of course I'm not going to solve it. I'm running a lemonade stand.
Yeah, we're running a lemonade stand.
So I don't have the answer because I like a lot of what like global, like our globalized safe economy and society gives me. I like a lot of those things, and I also selfishly benefit from a lot of like the power and control that the U.S. has especially as somebody who immigrated here and found, got to make a
cross
podcast. I crossed the ditch.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like I'm wary of, something like can the debt grow forever? Right. If you listen to that one economist who wrote The Deficit Myth, apparently it can. Apparently it can.
Stephanie Kelton has interesting ideas.
Or from other perspectives, like maybe you have a strong like moral stance, like built in what you'd call like socialist values, and you want to see the deconstruction of the global order for those reasons. Like, I don't know. I don't know what path is correct.
I don't have that take, but I can respect it, right? I can totally see it and make sense. Maybe a loss here is offset by a greater gain in the world. If you're all humans benefit the rising tide. I get that. I actually have no problem with that. The thing that makes me mad is Americans that don't realize that the reason that a guy managing a Buc-ee's in Texas makes more than a European doctor is because of these systems of power that have America at the core. Yes. And like they think they can vote to dismantle this stuff, and they think they're just born better. That they're just they're getting this, they're not, and they're gonna feel the punishment from this stuff unraveling as they are more and more not protected from equal competition with the globe. So I don't think it's fair. I agree it's not fair. But I'm saying as an American who wants a certain thing, it's crazy to not understand the consequences of dismantling this stuff that's all to your benefit.
I definitely agree with that take, which is that it is not to America's benefit to dismantle this. Like we have benefited from deciding the global order. And then if you dismantle it, there's like you said, there's arguably there's all sorts of crazy complex things. I don't think it's great that American spy agencies have picked winners in various countries over the past 100 years. Like that's fucked up. Like we just get to decide.
The thing about it is like, I can't think of a single time it backfired.
Right. That's true.
The thing about it is like, it's just
it always worked out so smoothly. So I just really don't see.
It's deeply immoral. The idea that we do that.
The CIA simply batted 1,000. Can I say it? They were kind of the Shohei Ohtani of government agencies.
They went to Venezuela. They pitch and bat.
The fucking CIA was the Ohtani of government agencies. Fire bar. That is fire. They just kept knocking.
They just keep. It just
every coup.
Because if it blew back, if it had blown back
out of the country,
if it had blown back, I'd be critical. I'd be critical. No, I think that's what I'm saying. Is like there's so many. I think this is why these things are like hard to come to any like solution or determination of. I feel like is like there's so many little aspects of like how your lives are impacted by these decisions, especially over the long term. And it's hard to make confident decisions of like this thing should be this way, because I think for the average person, including me, it's hard to identify the costs, like the pros and cons of what those decisions will be.